So welcome to a new video series where we're getting into conversation with leaders in IT and Agile about subjects that are of particular interest and relevance to them. Today, I'm joined by Alistair Corrie. Alistair is the co-founder of the Corrie Partnership, a consultancy that provides a unique blend of Agile and leadership expertise, coupled with extensive financial and corporate experience alongside. And I think that gives you a particular strength in being able to, perhaps a desire of a lot of people in Agile, being able to connect the organization to the teams that are working. So in our conversation today, the core subject is the role of leadership in Agile, or the role of leadership in agility. So let's kick off and see where the conversation goes. I'll just ask you that question straight off, if I may, Alistair, which is, what is the role of leadership in agility?
What is the role of leadership in Agile? So it's a fascinating question, I think, and I think a lot of us, a lot of leaders, senior leaders, probably they look at Agile and they hear things like, well, the teams are supposed to be cross-functional, self-organizing, and autonomous, and that is indeed what we want them to be. But then we probably sit there and ask ourselves, well, then what do I do? What's my role as a leader? What is the role of leadership within that? And I think that what we need to help people understand is that leadership is always critical. I believe that nothing happens until a leader steps up and says, you know, we're going over there, sort of thing. So I think leadership is crucial to everything, and leadership within Agile is even more important than probably it is in Waterfall, because we need to learn how to get that really right. I think, and we need to move away from a command and control leadership to what I call a emotionally intelligent, an enabling or a servant type of leadership, in order to allow Agile to deliver all the things, or the Agile teams to deliver all the things that are promised when we start moving towards Agile. So I think it's crucially important to get that right, and a significant part of the thing. I don't think it will work properly without it.
Agreed entirely. I'd just pick up on a phrase there you used about emotionally intelligent leadership, and you were kind of characterizing that as a distinction with other types of leadership. Could you just characterize what you mean by that a little bit more?
No, absolutely. So I think the emotionally. So let me, if I can just share my screen with you quickly, I can just show you what I mean. Let me share this and go to. So emotional intelligence has been popularized by Daniel Goleman, who's a psychologist, and he talks about. Can you see that screen?
Yes.
He talks about emotional intelligence as being these four things. So on the left-hand side, it's about how you focus on what you do with yourself, so your self-awareness and your self-management. And then on the right-hand side is how you deal with the outside world, i.e. social awareness and relationship management. And he's done a lot of research and is still incredibly active now, talking about what are the things that make it work. And for me, things like on the left-hand side, being able to control your own emotions when, especially when things go wrong, being able to exert emotional self-control is part of what I see as being an important element of emotional intelligence, emotional intelligent leadership. And then on the other side, really, again, empathy and being able to, and the idea that you're developing others, the idea that you're actually leading people by serving them, by to make sure that you create the right environment to get the best out of them, rather than trying to control or micromanage every moment of their day or their working hour. And I suppose it's trying to understand that contrast. It's a huge subject, and it's one of these things that we use language and we use words to shortcut things. But I think this quadrant here it beautifully illustrates quickly what are the steps in that. And what is interesting, that the research has shown that if an individual can become reasonably competent at just 6 of those subheadings in there, out of the entire box, I think there's 18 in there. If you can just pick 6 of them, you immediately put yourself in the top 10% of effective leaders in terms of all sorts of things, such as sales results, promotions, all sorts of other things like that. It's just the research has been quite extensive on this. It's quite fascinating. I don't know if I've sort of fully answered the question there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it certainly does. Perhaps I know some of the answers to these questions, perhaps in a sense, anyway. But I guess the thing I'd like us to get into, or would value us getting into, is why those kind of traits, which you could argue could work in any organization, or rather any leader could pick those up and get some benefit from it. What's the particular relationship between those kind of behaviors and those kind of focuses and success in a more agile, or in an agile way of working?
Sure. So for me, I think when we're working with an agile team, we need all the brains switched on and all the brains working at their best. We need communication to be really, really at its optimal, and we need to be firing. You've got if you're using Scrum, you've got a 2-week sprint. You've got 2 weeks in which to, go from idea to a product, or a working feature, or a working piece of software, or whatever it is. And so you really don't have time for what I call emotional interference. You don't have time to have been chewed up by your boss and all the emotional negative baggage that goes with that. When our emotions are triggered, when our amygdala, or our chimp brain, or our lizard brain, when that's triggered, it can take moments to get back to normal if you know how to do that. But it can take hours, and it can sometimes take days, and sometimes that some of us probably still have grudges from kids that we were beaten up with in our school ground. We still hold those grudges. So you can imagine that if we don't look after our teams properly, their brains will not be doing what we have hired them to do, which is to solve problems, to innovate, to create, and so forth, because our brains can't do those things if we are in a fight, flight, or freeze mentality or mode. And I think the reason why it's so important, therefore, is that we need to be conscious of how we're saying what we're saying, and how it's being perceived, so that we can make sure that ultimately those brains are in the optimal place. In a simple way, we need our folks to be happy. That's, to use a very silly generic term, happy and safe, emotionally safe, psychologically safe. But to me, it's more than that. It's actually understanding that the brain has its infinite capacity for solutions, for problem solving, for innovation, but not if it's being switched off by an emotional flood. Does that sort of,
yeah, very much so. And I'm glad you picked up on psychological safety there. Psychological safety is another buzz phrase often, and I like that. Certainly in the slide you just showed a little while ago, and some of the conversation there, you're getting into a bit of the meat of it, really. I've certainly worked with a number of teams where and perhaps we should talk a little bit about constraints in a little while as well, but this idea of a person's feeling like they might not be able to contribute just in case they get shot down, or concerns about social position and so on. That's the amygdala and so on again, cause people to hold back. And back to your point about emotionally intelligent leadership, if you've got a leader that is tuned into not necessarily exactly what's going on, I suppose that doesn't matter, but the fact that there could be something going on would, I hope, lead them to begin to act in a way to start finding that stuff out.
Exactly.
The classic quote I use, or a quote I use, but experience I had of this kind of stuff was an engineer who, a fairly senior, well-paid engineer who, as part of an incident team, we were asking him to work in a slightly different way. And for some reason, the behaviors weren't changing, he wasn't moving. And finally, the sentence that came out almost accidentally from him, I suppose, was, well, what will I look like, or what will the team look like if we make a mess of this? Slightly misquoting. But
No,
then it was
absolutely.
like, aha, that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling of not being safe.
Yeah, our brains are incredible. We perceive threats and fear so much more powerfully, that it seems, than we perceive, the good stuff. And I was you go off on a 2-hour cycle ride. The one incident where something happened which wasn't to your liking is the first thing that you report back on when you get home.
Yep.
And that thing only lasted a few seconds, maybe not even 10 seconds. And yet it's the thing that your brain picks up on, and it's just the way we're wired. And I think that part of emotional intelligence is understanding that this is what the brain is doing, and therefore helping our own brain and other people's brains to be in the safe space.
Exactly, entirely. The fact that we're dealing with something irrational fundamentally, and believing, or maybe that's the first mistake or the first pitfall for a lot of leaders, is believing that this stuff can be controlled, or people are rational and will operate in the best interests. But all of these subtle examples tend to demonstrate that they don't quite.
They don't know what you and I think this is the thing, isn't it? We when you're responsible for an organization, and you're responsible for all the costs on the profit and loss account and all this sort of thing, and you look at the hardware and you kind of go, I know how to keep that hardware safe and clean, oiled, and I know how to get the most out of it.
Yes.
The same with software. We know how to make sure make sure the code is clean. We know how to make sure it's bug free. We know how to make sure that it's safe from cyber attacks and so on. And we know how to get the most out of it, and we know what to do if it's not giving us the results that we want. And then we've got peopleware, and we mostly find it very hard, because you need to, and the thing is, as leaders, we need to invest that extra time in the relationships. To allow those things to happen, because it does take time to create that environment, and you can lose it so quickly if you don't. You can be building. Everyone goes, and this happened recently on this gig. We were just really humming. Everyone was hyper excited. We were getting emails saying that we really hope that this is the way forward for our transformation projects. Great stuff, well done, keep doing it. Then we didn't do one thing we got wrong, and did it the old way, and it was just like the torrent of oh, here we go again, back to normal. Oh, I see, that was just a short. So we had to work back to get people, no, that was just a mistake, we're back, we're good. So quickly
I don't know, it's very interesting. How did that when you said we had to kind of admit the mistake, I think that's kind of an important, or there's something important in there about showing up as or continuing to show up as the leader who isn't necessarily infallible.
No, exactly. I think that is important. I think leaders, a lot of the time, and we all know this, that you get promoted outside of your comfort zone, or to the level of your incompetence, or something, I think is the phrase.
The Peter principle, or
something crazy like that. And I think it's really understanding what is our role as leaders. And I think it probably summarize it. I mean, there's lots that we have to do, but they're summarized into two things. One is to provide a vision and a strategy. And that's something that we can do. The next big thing, that's one big thing. The next big thing is to create the right environment. And then we got things like remove blockers and all those sorts of things. And I think those probably could sit within the environment if you just want two things. If you want three things, you could add removing blockers and so on, because there are certain conversations that only the leader can have, but they should be having that on behalf of the team who are cracking on with all their great work that they're doing. So it should be a case of the teams doing what they do and doing it well and cracking on with it, and having permission to try and fail and fix it and carry on. And then they should be able to go to the leadership and say, could you talk to so-and-so, because they're not listening to us. Or could you have a conversation, or could you fix this? And what things we can each solve. But admitting to your mistakes is, I mean, we're all human, and I mean, to lead by pretending that you know everything is crazy. And yet we as leaders have a massive fear of being found out to be ignorant. Because a lot of the times we are leaders because we are specialists in an area. So a lot of in my previous background in finance, the people who are successful and who move up are the ones who have the technical knowledge, that they have those hard skills. And I think as leaders we need to realize that if 90% of your skill set is emotional intelligence and the other 10% is the sort of the hard skills, the technical skills, that's what you should be looking for, because it's all of that. It's keeping everybody going. You're not required to go and do the coding. You as the leader are not required to go and enter the numbers into the accounts. You're creating the environments that others can do that well. And it wasn't your job to know that sometimes, and being, there's if I may, there's a brilliant piece of information around pilots, the airline pilots, a book called The Naked Pilot. I don't know if you've come across that.
No,
that
I
talks
haven't.
about how, no, brilliant book. It talks about how back in the day, the cockpit was a very probably toxic environment is the right word, but it was very hierarchical. The captain was the captain. Everybody was subservient to that person. And even so, that many airline crashes with big fatalities were shown to be caused by the fact that the other people in the cockpit didn't call out the obvious thing that was about to happen, because they didn't want to make the captain look bad. And in today's world we shudder at that, but they actually had to go through a process of retraining everybody and getting them to understand that actually admitting your mistake is actually a very good thing and an important thing. And I actually spoke with a couple of pilots from one of the big national companies, and they said that was absolutely true. After every flight, they do a debrief, and the first thing they do is they call out their mistakes. Even if it was, I almost flipped that switch to switch off XYZ. All those near misses, they call them out, because what they want is for all the other pilots in the organization to swarm on that problem and figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen again. And it's how do you do that? In order to do that, you need to create that safety net that says that if you admit to your mistakes, you're not going to be hauled over the coals, which happens, and you're not going to be have points deducted. So you're then encouraged to admit to your mistakes, because that helps everybody, and other people admitting to their mistakes helps you. And to create that environment would be just fantastic. We also witnessed that when we watched some former Red Arrows who had just finished a flying show, an acrobatic show, and they had a debrief, and we had the privilege of watching that. Again, absolutely fascinating. First thing they do, right, well, when I was coming in here, I did that. I was off by X millimeters, or I was over here, sort of 4 centimeters off, or whatever it was, what felt like little things to us, but they were huge to them. And by admitting it, there were no elephants in the room. No one was kind of going like, when is Bob going to admit the fact that he was just basically facing the wrong way, or whatever it was he was doing. And it was fantastic, so liberating, so powerful. But you need the leadership to provide that assurance that if I admit to my mistakes, I am not going to be fired or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for
and then you improve, I think. Yeah.
I entirely thank you for the recommendation. There's another book in that space is Black Box Thinking, Matthew Syed's book. It similarly talks about the same thing, but tries to extend some of that thinking you're just describing, or is encouraging people to extend that thinking beyond the airline industry, where you've got the forensic review of what happened after an airline disaster, let's say. You don't have that in organizations or in hospitals or in and so on and so on and so on. And this brings us right back round to the psychological safety conversation, in a sense of feeling like it's okay to be who you are, and it's okay. It's never okay to be reckless and dangerous. That we're not talking about that, but it's okay to, in the pursuit of a great result, Everyone makes mistakes, especially in the complex, changeable world we're in.
Absolutely.
I'm not very good at
Absolutely.
predicting the future, and I don't think anyone else is either, truly.
No, exactly. And it does happen in other places, which is good if people allow it. Whereas if you don't, I've been reading this incredible book here, which I haven't quite finished yet, but I'm just absolutely loving
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Dave Marquet's Turn the
Yeah.
Ship Around. In there, he talks about what happens when you make a mistake and how to help people avoid them. But it's that whole safety net of if you he talks about people are so afraid of making a mistake that they end up doing the minimum rather than daring to accomplish great things. And I can't exactly remember the phrase that he uses, but he was trying to turn their mindset around so that they would accomplish great things, not just try and avoid making mistakes. Because and so many, I've been in that situation where you get beaten up by your boss once for getting the accounts wrong, and trust me, you never do that again. But the problem with that is you end up double and triple checking your work, which just takes so much time, which could so easily have been used for other things, because you have that fear factor that's going on, rather than the I think you've missed a couple of things. Could you just go and fix them? That'd be great, fantastic. By the way, 98% of this is awesome, well done.
Yeah.
As opposed to, wait a second, if you get this number wrong, how can I possibly see these accounts? Blah 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 blah. Just like.
Or teaching you the importance, or teaching that person the importance of it in the first place, and the context, so that they can find their own mistakes and errors, and and don't need that. This is we're in danger of going into public policy and otherwise, where it's for the 0.5% or less, rather than for the rest of us, that we have these rules in place often.
Yes, exactly.
Just change, or not exactly change tack, but talking about this. So we're at a relatively high level at the moment, talking about the need for a good destination and psychological safety. And we've tried to connect some of that, or rather, I think we have connected some of that to how in an agile environment where you want the best of all of the people, or rather the value can come from getting the best of all the people to work on something that is likely to be very complicated, or rather very complex, very changeable, and therefore you need that. I was just thinking, for anybody that watches this conversation, can we offer some specific ideas or things that they could perhaps look for in their own teams to see whether or not they are displaying a good level of emotional, intelligent leadership, or warning signs for the kind of things that are going on in their teams? Do you see what I mean? So some kind of
there are a lot of great books which and a lot of great things that you can do online which sort of help you assess your own emotional intelligence and sort of that of your team. But I think the way to think about it is to talk, maybe as part of the retrospectives, when you walk into the room, are people kind of like, being really reticent to put forward ideas or to talk and so on, or are they getting on with it? I think the biggest challenge with this, I'm rambling a bit here, but the biggest challenge with the whole principle is, because I used not to be in this space, is that you just don't know that you're getting it so very, very wrong. You walk into a room and you pontificate and you grandiose and you give it all, and and all that, and you walk out and you sort of think, wow, didn't I motivate those guys? And the door closes behind you, and all they can think is, what an idiot. And and then they spend the next 2 hours talking about that rather than getting on with their great work. It is hard. I think we do need to help each other with this. It is really the only thing I can offer, is that we need to be able to, through coaching each other, through friendly coaching, we need to say, well, can I offer the following to you? To know it yourself, it's hard, and it's emotional intelligence, I think, is one of those things. I think we discussed this on the email earlier. It's one of those things that if you think you are emotionally intelligent, you're probably not. It's one of those fantastic sort of catch-22s that you're always evolving, and you're always having to keep working on it, and always having to move forward with it.
Some sort of
So
parallel to Heisenberg's
yes.
uncertainty principle in here. I'll echo or pick up on the point you made about getting other people to help or coaching. That's incredibly powerful. So in the spirit of Emperor's New Clothes, you often can't see that you are obviously naked in this environment,
Yes.
where this takes some bravery from an individual and a bit of vulnerability. But to say, for example, if I was in a leadership team, I'll invite one of my peers in to a session that I'm running and just ask for their observation, ask for their
Yes.
support. The team doesn't need to know why the person there is. You could be very open and share with the team, or you could say, we're just we're learning more about what each other are doing. The team don't need to know that that person is there looking at you, providing some feedback at how the orchestration of the meeting works.
No.
But then you can look for signals like as you describe things like people not speaking up. You can see where people very obviously defer to the leader to check those sideways glances, just to check whether or not it's okay or not to say something, and give you a bit of a view about how people are talking in the meeting. Something that I've done recently when I join other people's meetings, which is it's difficult, you're right, to see yourself in this context. And it's something that came from a clean language book. And I will put I can't remember the name of the author, and that's incredibly rude of me. So I will put that in the notes anyway of the video here. But it's From Contempt to Curiosity is the name of the book. I know that bit at least. And in there, there's a description of kind of mapping teams, or rather drawing a picture of teams. And I now do that quite often. So very simply, you track as an observer what's going on in the meeting. And you can, just by a very simple visualization, if at the end of the meeting, your picture looks like kind of everything's going to one corner where the boss is, and everything is going backwards and forwards. So I'll categorize the lines by question or request or command if that's what I'm seeing. But then that starts to let you see what's happening in a meeting.
Yes.
A truly flat and open meeting doesn't have that shape. It has much more of a meshed
That's really good.
kind
like
of view.
Yes.
That's certainly one thing I do.
I think that's a really good visual, isn't it? You can quantify that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's the way I'm talking about it here is unscientific. So it's not the sort of thing that I'd then go up to the leader afterwards and say, look at this thing, because that's probably going to but at least it gives me some hints as to where I might want to push.
Yes, absolutely.
And where I might want to dig, and the kind of questions I'd want to ask other people.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think if we can observe, we can see, because I suppose, when most of us have experienced being led by poor leaders, and hopefully some of us have experienced really good leadership.
Yes.
And the good leadership are those where you just want to do everything to make your leader look good, and you want everything to make them successful, because you don't want them to have any cause to be fired or whatever, because you don't want the next person to come in and take over who is likely to be like all the others before him or her. So and I think a lot of leaders don't realize that if you create that right environment, you will have a level of loyalty and support that you could only ever dream of, because people want to keep that status quo, and they will work extremely hard to keep that, and to make sure you don't go anywhere as a leader. I've experienced that from both sides, and it's very, very, very powerful. And I think in coming back to the point about where the questions are, and those lines that you said, we can also look at where people are allowed to make decisions, at what levels can decisions be made, and what types of things are the decisions that are coming up for the leader. One indicator for me of positive leadership is when the team is excited about you going into for example, the sprint review, and they're excited about showing you what they've done, like kids coming home and showing mum and dad what they've just painted. It's when that's going on, I think you're on the correct side of this.
Yeah.
When they're kind of we've got to show, and waiting for the for the emotionally unintelligent rant or whatever it is that might come because things aren't exactly as were expected.
And then probably sandbagging their results, so to speak, to make it look as nice as it possibly could.
Do other people also do that then?
Well, entirely. I was just thinking about that. If you get a Scrum team, let's say, giving the leader some amount of pressure, or putting pressure on the leader to say, we need your support in this area, this area, this area to go fast, and that's not met with resentment and how dare you speak to me that way, then another good indication, if people are starting to, if you witness people being comfortable challenging you as much as you might as the leader, especially the way that we've been indoctrinated in some of this stuff, you might need to swallow hard when this happens the first few times. But your ability to be challenged and demonstrate that actually you don't know it all, these are all the great indicators. Coming back to the example you gave earlier of the team that were going forward very well, they noticed when something happened in the old pattern. So you need to continue to demonstrate your own learning and your own behavior along the way.
No, exactly. And I think, people enjoy that, and again, we have these very peculiar models of leadership which are incredibly outdated, and we've got so much information now that has been written about how we should treat it, going back to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, all the way through to the most recent information that we have on neuroscience of leadership. It's just so much is there that you sort of wonder how we haven't all moved to a place where everyone can go to work and feel comfortable and not feel the fear that many of us have experienced. That Monday morning feeling of I just can't face going to work. Where, as opposed to the feeling that I've had with some leaders, where come Friday evening, and it just genuinely has happened, come Friday evening, I'm so excited and motivated about what we're achieving and what we're accomplishing together that, I'm really looking forward to the weekend, don't get me wrong, but I can't wait for Monday when we're going to get back in and get cracking with this again. And that's just an awesome place to be. And that's something that I think, as we move up as we move from waterfall to agile, and the teams move from extrinsic motivation, where they are being told, I do what I'm told, to autonomy, mastery, purpose, or where they have the psychology of ownership, where they feel that it's theirs. When that is happening already, then it's not a hard thing for us as leaders to move from command and control over to the right-hand side, where we can actually deliver the environment, the vision and the environment for them to continue working in that way. No, it's fascinating.
Exactly. Thank you, Alistair. I enjoyed the conversation a great deal. I think we've covered the subject at least to some degree, and we've got plenty of book recommendations that we can pass on to anybody that's done this. But certainly, if people are interested in the kinds of things to look for psychological safety, we talked a little bit about some clean language stuff earlier as well, and David Marquet's book again. Yeah, that's a great strong recommendation for people. So I'll make sure the links are in the chat for everybody to see those. Just from a practical point of view, before we close, if people who are watching this video are interested in some of what you've been saying around the emotion and intelligence of leadership, and are kind of going on that journey themselves and might need some support, how might they engage you? Is there somewhere that they should go? I'll link your website, of course, in here.
Sure, that's very kind. So yeah, I think the best way to get hold of me is through my website. So that's me there, the Corrie Partnership, myself and my wife. We own that little thing. In terms of what we would do together, I think probably this is the best way to think about it. I don't think it's very hard for this move to happen. I think most of us are yearning for a better way of leading, a way that makes us feel good, because we know that the people that we're working with are feeling good about themselves, feeling positive about themselves. So I kind of talk about this. I talk about this. We can explain things to people, and for most of us, that will be enough. For most people, just having the conversation will be enough for them to go, yes, let me start this journey. Some people need evidence, and there's a huge amount of evidence around that explains how and why this stuff is relevant, whether it's emotional intelligence, whether it's agile or whatever, the information is there. The other, and again, that's something that can provide another great way, and I think this is something where yourself and myself are probably really suited to, is modeling. So we like to roll our sleeves up and work with the teams to develop something with, develop a project with a team and actually show and deliberately explain what we're doing. So teach deliberately what we're doing instinctively, if you will, and model that. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful ways. And then of course there's coaching as well. But I think we can help each other. I put there that note, a network of cool uncles. When my dad wanted to tell me something that I just wasn't hearing, he would talk to his brother, my uncle, and say, could you tell Alistair that thing? And of course, cool uncle would come in and tell me this thing, and I go, wow, that's amazing, I'm definitely going to do that. And my dad would roll his eyes and stuff, and it's just due to the familiarity. That's human nature. And I think we can do this with each other, and we can help each other as well. The familiarity of us in front of that person that we're trying to influence is harder, where we can bring somebody in for 2 minutes, 2 hours, or 2 days, or whatever, and help land that message. And that's one way I would start the process of moving along that continuum.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time.
No problem at all.